Oh, we can spread out.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us during this lunchtime session. Quick show of hands, who in the audience knows what Bitcoin is? Bitcoin, lots of people. Who knows what Ethereum is? Okay. Who knows what Corda is? Hardly anyone, right? So we're here to discuss that third category, which is enterprise blockchains, things like Corda, things like Hyperledger, which are being used by the enterprise. So first question to the panel. In the enterprise, do you think blockchain technologies, where do you think there'll be a bigger impact? In a financial context, like back office for banks, which we've heard a lot about, or non-financial context? Maybe we'll start with
I think it
Noelle.
depends on the time frame you're looking at. I mean, the fact is that blockchain applications are live today in some financial contexts. Banks around the world are working on all sorts of projects. I mean, finance is such a huge thing with so many different interlocking functions and sections that there is so much work going on focusing on small applications that will coalesce to give us a bigger picture. But again, the time frame, that's happening now. It will become more apparent as more projects go live and as the ones that are live get bigger traction. But then once that happens, and through what we've learned through the financial applications, we will see real use case, real projects emerge in other sectors, and the possibilities are huge. I mean, there's many.
What sectors, very quickly, do you think you'll see this?
Well, the ones that I find most interesting, obviously the trade finance, but that's part of the financial sector. Healthcare and identity, they're two things that society needs us to improve the efficiency of.
We'll jump to
So,
John.
yeah, I mean, in a disruptive sense, I think that we're really talking about public blockchains. A lot of people hear this phrase DLT, distributed ledger technology, but Oracle had DLTs in the 90s, so what's very innovative about that? With public blockchains, you have a native digital bearer instrument, which allows for the increased efficiencies that we're going to see that will ultimately be disruptive. So a great example is, you can think of many in finance or in healthcare or in stock trading, but the one that comes to mind most easily, I think, is SWIFT in financial services, because the public blockchain is first and foremost about removing the rent-seeking gatekeeper in the middle. So in any industry, you isolate who the gatekeeper is in the middle, and that's who's being disrupted by the technology. If you can't identify who that gatekeeper is, then it's probably you. Now, in the example of SWIFT, the largest Bitcoin transaction to ever occur was for $82 million worth. And SWIFT was very interested in this transaction because it occurred for an overall fee of 4 cents at the time, and it occurred on a Sunday, which SWIFT can't compete with. So that's the kind of disruption that we're talking about.
Gotcha. Chitra?
Yeah, Noelle already mentioned about the healthcare, right? While financial services leads the pack, definitely the immediate following industry is healthcare. We are also seeing in retail, insurance, and the excitement actually is the focus on even the horizontal processes, going beyond these vertical industry use cases. I'm sure we'll get to that. So, for example, the food safety use case that probably you read about, that IBM is partnering with Walmart, Kroger, Nestle, Unilever, is really about a cause bigger than the industry itself. It's about the food safety, a cause that we all can get behind. So I expect that more and more of the blockchain technology will get pushed into the fabric of the enterprise.
And in fact, it goes even further because it's not, as Chitra mentioned, it's not so much about siloing verticals. Once we do start to realize that, for instance, on the food safety, that will improve processes for the big incumbents like Walmart, but it will also improve processes and open doors for small suppliers that at the moment are shut out of the trade supply finance chain because either they can't get the finance, or they can't get the right guarantees, or they can't get the insurance. And then we start to think about what will happen to the insurance industry if all of that becomes developed. It's the collaboration across sectors, not just within verticals, that's going to be a big change that we see in the next few years.
I guess the secret sauce of blockchains is consensus, right? Trying to get all these parties aligned, pointed in the right direction. The hot topic now, at least in public blockchains, are ICOs, right? Initial coin offerings, a new funding mechanism that has raised hundreds of millions to date. I remember when cryptocurrencies, it was unimaginable that banks and enterprises would talk about adopting this technology, but yet here we are. So I'm just wondering, I'm going to ask the panel, do you think ICOs will be useful in some way to the enterprise?
Yes, I think we first have to stop using the term ICO if we possibly can, because ICO is one of these tech terms that gets overused, like AI, for instance. Initial coin offering is what ICO stands for. First of all, it's about digital tokens, and that's where the enterprise use can happen. Rethinking business processes, transferring value with cryptographic placeholders. And it's not just about the initial coin offering, which is a financing method. It's about the long-term use and the building out of ecosystems. And when you start to think of verticals or horizontals as ecosystems with many players, all of whom need to trust each other, well, that's when the digital token potential becomes more apparent.
Yeah, I think ICOs are going to be tremendously useful to the enterprise and to the ecosystem in general, because they will disrupt the fundraising process and the venture capital process, which they are already doing. The majority of the ICOs today are done under the Ethereum subprotocol, but it's not entirely impossible to start seeing that functionality happen on the Bitcoin public blockchain as well. And this gets down to smart contracts. Most of the smart contract activity is occurring on Ethereum blockchain, which is a public blockchain, but it is also possible to construct smart contracts on the Bitcoin blockchain. And we're going to start seeing a lot more of this activity in 2018 as new features come online. It's not as elegant right now to construct smart contracts on Ethereum, on Bitcoin, but it ultimately will be safer.
Chitra, do you have thoughts on that?
So I agree with my co-panelists. I think the real challenge is going to be, it's not about the tokens, it's really about where do you exactly, which are the problems that lend themselves best for the blockchain. Institute of Business Value, an IBM entity that does a lot of technological research, when it surveyed many C-level, hundreds of C-level executives, one thing that came out of it that stuck in my mind was 8 out of 10 were concerned about how are we going to build this business networks cooperating with the competition. So those are some of the challenges that are going to be ahead of us.
And also redefining what we mean by business networks. I mean, you're so right, and IBM certainly has a huge history in developing and working with those. But what do we mean by business network? That is starting to change. Take the supply chain, for instance. We understand what that means. Take the ecosystems that we currently have. But look at what's happening across sectors. I mean, for instance, there's a blockchain consortium in the insurance industry in which you have big insurance companies collaborating with each other for the first time ever. I mean, that's a different type of network, not just between providers and clients, but among what used to be competitors and are still competitors, but they are now a network.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, but I don't have a lot of hope in the incumbents coming together in a consortium and disrupting themselves. That's not how we've seen disruption work. Uber wasn't created because of the taxi monopoly getting together and thinking about it. And the same with Airbnb. So the disruption comes from outside the industry. And this is the way it will occur, I think, with blockchain and Bitcoin as well.
Agree, but it does also depend what you mean by disruption. Again, disruption in one fell swoop with an entirely new model, or reforming from within and
Removing
adapting.
the current barriers to entry that the incumbents establish and bypassing those barriers.
So you think public chains will basically put pressure on the incumbents?
I do. We'll see a lot more companies entering spaces that you would think their name has no business being there, like all of the likely suspects to be in financial services, Amazon, Google, Twitter, Facebook, things like that, because the barriers to entry will be removed.
Sure. I wanted to go quickly through, for each of you, what are the industries or use cases that you are most excited about that you think has most potential using blockchain technology today? So maybe we'll start with Chitra.
Sure. Food safety we already mentioned. I just wanted to add, while the food safety use case is focusing on the business network of suppliers and the retailers, we are actually looking to expand. Yesterday I was talking with a plastic manufacturing company, and it dawned on us the containers are as an integral part of food safety. It's not just the food, even the container that it is being housed in matters a lot in this, and why not expand? And now you're going out of this, what you're referring to, Noelle, right? The traditional typical entities participating in the business network. So some of the use cases I'm excited about are in the enterprise on it, not setting aside the financial services use cases, which lots of our audience will be familiar with. Some of the things would be, think about it, we have implemented a blockchain that's live and operating in the context of accounts payable. I mean, imagine that this is a back office operation. It's enterprise, it's in the fabric of enterprise. It's not very sexy, I myself would say, but it's the bread and butter of every enterprise. Every company has procurement and accounts payable. So we looked at the invoice processing, and the cost per invoice is anywhere between over $11 all the way to median price of over $3, and the really best performing brings it down to. We looked at and said, how can we actually use a blockchain to really bring down that cost per invoice as well as time to value, freeing up the cash flow. And we worked with one of the largest global consumer products goods company. They have presence in hundreds of countries, suppliers worldwide. Just lends itself for this kind of implementation. So that's up and running now. So
when was this implemented, and can you name
just this year?
that company?
I'm going to wait for IBM, the bigger organization, to make a big splash about it. I'm just giving a little teaser.
So it's a construction
June
parts
wants,
company.
he wants the scoop.
How much have you processed so far in terms of accounts payable?
Yeah, I'll let the...
You're not going to get it.
Nice try.
But I will give you what we have seen in just it's a vast library of smart contracts in order to tackle the variations in the suppliers, the way of submitting invoices, processing invoices, and so on. And what we are observing even in just during the pilot period is that we were able to see the reduction in cost per invoice. I talked about the metric that finance operations follow closely by 60 to 70%. So we are between $1 to $2. So it is a tremendous advantage we can pass back to our clients.
Sure.
I do agree that supply chain management is the low-hanging fruit beyond financial service applications, and I think it lends itself very well to a hybrid solution. Because no public blockchain wants that data polluting their public blockchain. So when you have a hybrid solution, you end up using a combination of a private blockchain and a public blockchain. The public blockchain is therefore typically used for dispute resolution or the final settlement, payment finality. That way you're using the public blockchain for ideally what it's suited for.
Sure. Any particular use cases that come to mind, or?
Well, in the supply chain management, with clients I'm working with, they are competing directly with IBM. So
Sure.
I can't share that either. But that's how I know it's the low-hanging fruit.
Right.
I'm more interested in the private blockchain applications for enterprise, because I do believe that there are so many obstacles to overcome still on the public ones, mainly privacy. And when you're talking about applications such as healthcare and identity, which I've mentioned before are particularly interesting, that's a big issue. And enterprises and regulators are not going to be happy with information, sensitive information, being on public blockchains. That being said, private blockchains do also have their hurdles to overcome, and that is, are they decentralized? Are they censor-proof? Et cetera, et cetera.
Security, right?
Security. Security is another huge application that we are, as a sector, starting to look at very seriously. And once we get that cracked, is perhaps an optimistic word, but think about what it could do for the rollout of IoT devices and things like that. Right now, there's a big threat of security, devices being hacked, and when you think how big these devices and how systemic they can become, is a serious danger. With blockchain, private, perhaps even public, that could become much less of a threat.
Yeah, you're quite right. I think Wanxiang in China, which is an auto parts company, they've talked about how they want to use a blockchain as a data transport layer for massive IoT applications like citywide scale ones.
Yeah.
Another one that's been talked about publicly a lot is tracing diamonds, so that you don't have blood diamonds getting into the normal
startup
diamond supply chain.
Everledger, right?
So Everledger does that, and they use a hybrid solution for that.
Right.
Yeah, and after diamonds, there's art, and then think about land titling, and I mean the possible ripple effects into other sectors is huge.
Chitra, you mentioned that you get this question a lot. Does smart contracts, is there an overlap between smart contracts on a blockchain and artificial intelligence? I'm curious what your answer is.
Yeah, so I happen to be straddling both areas. I'm a cognitive scientist by training, so I do a lot of business process reimagination, transformation with the right ABCs, AI, blockchain, and cloud. So given the blocks are going to hold tremendous amount of data, some of the use cases we are looking at, even in, let's say, mortgage lending, which is where I spent, during the US housing crisis, I spent quite a bit of time embedded in that industry, that it's going to be fascinating to run a new kind of analytics, right? Not just based on quantitative data, but all the logs around it and the notes and the, we are looking at ways to improve the credit decisioning, let me put it that way, for the benefit of mortgage insurance companies as well, so that it's not reworked, right? So the information is most authoritative, authentic, and once, and how do you continuously update that view of a borrower, a prospective customer's creditworthiness? So a lot of, plenty of AI insights to be gleaned from the data that blocks.
Sure. So blockchain basically as a data source, right, for AI applications to mine.
And it gives additionally, it gives the transactional flow also, right? And that is very, very important. Where the process has been, or where the information, for example, this loan has passed through, and that plays a role into the right kind of insight to take the next action.
Right.
And actually, what Chitra's brought up about data is fascinating, tying into what you were mentioning before about security. There's a massive, massive amount of data being accumulated every single second. I mean, via your phones are being tracked, your cars being tracked, the amount of data that we input into the internet when we use it. And as we've seen through some very public high-profile hacks recently, centralized data repositories are dangerous. I mean, they're systemically dangerous. And hopefully we will be able to find a way, using a hybrid solution of public and private blockchains, to maintain data in a less vulnerable way. We need that, because if we are going to depend, through especially the increased presence of artificial intelligence, if we're going to depend more and more on the data that we're collecting to run society, we need better security.
And that's one of the big promises of blockchain, is that you might end up in a situation where you, the individual, you control your own data, and you allow others to access it.
Which ties into identity. Yeah.
I'd like to add too that eventually we will solve the scalability problems. The two leading public blockchains, Ethereum and Bitcoin, these scaling problems they're big and they're important, but just like the internet scaled from no mobile phones to everybody in the world having a mobile phone connected simultaneously, these challenges, they will be met, and it's just we're in the very, very early days right now.
Well, on that note, thank you to the panel for joining us today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.